driven system. This is the genesis of all wars we have been having in the past, how many years? So without changing, without analyzing yet again whether the current system is apt or not for this gigantic task we have to deal with, we may end up, we may fail, we may end up to the in front of the oven of 6 degrees. So I have my solution, but it seems to me the time is coming. So my solution is to start totally different idea, different game, and that is to cap global emissions. Cap global emissions. Scientists will tell you that maybe 1,000 gigaton CO2 from here to 2050. That if we limit our emissions, global emissions, within that 1,000 gigaton carbon budget, then we may be able to achieve 2 degrees by 40 to 60 probability. So let us cap global emissions and throw this is called carbon budget. Carbon budget should be sold to the polluters so that polluters pay for that carbon budget, and then there will be money raised from that sales, and that will be given to developing countries to end poverty. So that is just something which can be presented before we make decisions on this crucial issue.
Thank you, Ambassador, for bringing us back to real-world policy objectives. I saw one more hand over there, but I think the hand moved. That was Stephen over there.
Yeah. Well, I feel funny asking my question after that, actually, because that is the most relevant question. So maybe I'll maybe rephrase it a little bit in the context of that question and then go back to what I was going to ask. So I mean, one way of asking that in the context of this panel is, so I'm interested actually in the same paper, is can a focus on power and legitimacy and the forum shopping and so on that we saw, can it help us understand better why it is that it's been so difficult to get to a solution like this? In other words, can you maybe say a little bit about how an analysis through power and legitimacy and the different forms or fragmentation is going to maybe try to help answer that question a little? I'll just ask my other question now anyway. I just want to give a counter narrative and get your reaction to it on COP15. And that is, so you sort of said, well, they went to the small group setting, and then they were able to do that because it was reflective of these other forums, the mini-lateral forums. I guess I would say that, first of all, doing that actually led to legitimacy problems. So I'm not sure that you can say that those mini-lateral forums somehow have this legitimacy. In fact, doing that led to the legitimacy problem. On the other hand, going in the other direction, it's not new in multilateral and big multilateral negotiations to have smaller groups negotiating. And I was at COP1 and there was a small group negotiation to try. So the real question is, where are those small groups pushing? And if they're pushing in a way that's sort of out of touch with the broader legitimacy, then there tends to be pushback, and we saw that, with the difference between Copenhagen and trying to bring back the legitimacy afterwards. Sorry, and then just one kind of secondary question is, you had a great deal of conceptual framework around legitimacy, but I didn't hear that much of a framework around what you meant by power. It seemed to be a very kind of relational view of power, that this group had, influence or whatever. And I think what's interesting is that, I don't know that their influence was certainly through the UNFCCC, but I think that maybe you could just work with or just think about complicating the relationship between power and legitimacy a little bit. And of course, you talk about discourse and other things. So maybe you can just talk about that if you thought about complicating that a little and see how they're intertwined a little more, rather than kind of seeing it coming in from outside.
As we started a little bit late, I think we can go on a little bit longer as well, but are there any more questions from the audience at this moment? Okay, then maybe you can think of some more questions, but I want to give the floor to each of you again. Try to keep it brief. Yes.
Thanks very much to Oren for these excellent comments and also for the questions, and my apologies again for having spoken much longer than I should have, and to my co-panelists. So I will keep this very short. Just related to Oren's comments, how do we define fragmentation and does it become an anti-signifier? I see it when I believe it. I would say I can see a cloud in the sky, but I cannot tell you where it begins and where it ends. That would be my answer. So basically, you're totally right, spot on. We have defined it in a very, very broad way in order to allow different concepts to come into our special issue. That's the beginning. And we then based our own understanding on your definition of overlapping regimes at the time, which was, I think, a 1996 article arguing that it's institutions that have come into this world without explicit reference to each other, however, overlapping, intersecting on a de facto basis, and leaving it there. That I could give you as an additional point, relational point. Everything else you add will put you in a certain corner. It was easy for us to avoid that as the guys who framed the special issue. It would have been much more difficult if we had to go for our own piece of analysis. Just to give you one example, if you go for sociological relations and really count the number of references and memberships across, or if you go for legal adherence, you already come into questions of how do you define coherence, for example. Or a better example, I mentioned this dynamic versus static definition of fragmentation. If you see fragmentation not as a snapshot you've taken once, but if you see it as a process, then where does fragmentation management begin and where does it end? I, by the way, owe you 2 names of contributors to a special issue which I forgot to mention. Christoph Humrich is doing that for Arctic governance, one of your pet projects, so to say. And he is also struggling a bit with where should he talk about management and where is it simply the ongoing evolution of fragmentation or complexity. Complexity, I agree with you. We can trade the term. I told you why we picked it at the time from the legal debate. I would simply hold on and repeat what I said before, that we could maybe use complexity as the overarching term for all sorts of different research projects we have, including interlinkages. And then we still would need a different term for fragmentation, for the people who particularly work on this type of level of analysis. But that would be my only answer. Otherwise, I'm very happy to trade. And to you, Ambassador, we will hear more about this from my 2 colleagues. But I've worked in many interdisciplinary projects so far, and there was always a bit the idea that the big barriers are the scientific ones. I would say the big barrier for climate change and for every environmental governance problem is social interaction. We as social scientists, political scientists, are working on barriers. If you want to find out about the game changer, it's exactly like Stephen Bernstein's question. You have to find out, why do we have the game we have? Why is the game not working? You have, but your solution would imply that
North-South dialogue, North-South ideology of 1960s.
Okay.
That's where this came from.
I leave that to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 2 sentences to Oren. Just mentioning on legitimacy in whose eyes, and of course in the kind of practice of global governance, that's what counts. That's also logical legitimacy. The reason we applied a normative framework is that methodologically, to go out and study sociological legitimacy, at which groups do you ask? This was a starting point, and we argue also that there is quite a lot of overlap between normative and sociological legitimacy, but it will be very different for different groups. For example, India and China, they kept stating when they came out of the unilateral meetings that the UNFCCC is the